make sure I got some.
I have a question. Do
Yes.
we go into, as it said, my video is stopped. Will they automatically, with being on this thing, will it automatically go into the meeting?
That means that you have stopped showing yourself on camera, which, by the way, on behalf of the rest of the attendees, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm not sure what I do here.
Oh, you're fine. Everything is fine. You can just you can see the meeting. Can you see the speaker? Can you see the different windows and all that?
No, not really.
Oh,
I guess I'll push. Actually, as long as I hear it, I don't care. See, 5 is live, living 2 new messages. Close.
Very good to see you, my friend. Jerry's wearing a hat too.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm well, Jerry. How the heck have you been? You have a good New Year's? Good Christmas?
I did. Thank you. Everybody's doing well. I got a hat on because I'm having some precancerous treatment and I look like I got the measles.
Oh, well, that's noble cause to wear.
Hey, Jerry, so is the basal cell?
Well, looks like we're getting started.
Good afternoon. And the first thing I'll say is Happy New Year. This is the first meeting of our 2024 year. My name is Bill Wilson. I'm standing in for Kim Johnson, who is away today, and I'm honored to do so. And I'd like to welcome all the Rotarians back, and especially the ones that are joining us virtually. This is going to be a great Rotary year, and we're going to continue to emphasize the fact that we are an organization of impact, outreach, engagement, and adaptability. And that last word, adaptability, is going to be crucial, and you'll hear more about that a little bit later as we talk about the world today. In the meantime, we will now bring Rotary and John Keebler to the front to have our our pledge, our 4-way test, and then you will be seated for the inspiration. Let us face the flag for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the 4-way pledge. It is the truth, it is the air. Please be seated. Welcome to the new year. Decked to halt with monthly payments, as many of us have dealt with during the Christmas season. I wanted to start out with our moment of inspiration with a thought. Those of you who have children or grandchildren may appreciate this. Recently, a daughter complained to her father that her life was miserable. She didn't know what she was going to do and if she could even make it. She was tired of fighting and struggling all the time. It seems one problem was solved, then another problem would follow. Her father was a chef and decided to teach her a lesson, so he took her to the kitchen. There, he filled 3 pots of water and placed each one on a high fire. Once the 3 pots began to boil, he placed potatoes in one pot, eggs in the second, and ground coffee in the third pot. He then let it sit and boil without saying a word to his daughter. The daughter was impatiently moaning and groaning, wondering what is he doing? After 20 minutes or so, the dad turned off the burners. He took the potatoes out of the pot, placed them in a bowl. Next, he put the boiled eggs and placed them in a bowl. And then finally, he labeled the coffee out and placed that in the cup. Turning to his daughter, he said, "Well, what do you see?" "Potatoes, eggs, and coffee." "Well, look closely," he said, and touched the potato. She didn't notice that they were now soft. Then he asked her to take the egg and break it. After pulling up the shelves, he observed The egg is now hard boiled. Finally, she was asked to sip the coffee. Its rich aroma brought a smile to her face. "Dad, what does all this mean?" she asked. He then explained that the potatoes, the eggs, and coffee beans each faced the same adversity, boiling water. However, each one reacted differently. The potato went in strong, hard, and unrelenting, but in boiling water became soft and weak. The egg was fragile with the thin outer shell protecting the liquid interior, but was put into boiling water, then inside the egg became hard. The coffee bean, however, those were unique. They were exposed to the same boiling water, but they changed the water and created something new. "Which one are you?" he said to his daughter. "When adversity knocks on your door, how do you respond? Are you a potato, an egg, or a coffee bean?" So the moral of the story is, things happen around us in life. Things happen to us. But the only thing that truly matters is what happens within us. For us in Rotary, we are purposed and passionate about making things happen. We are people of action and are community builders and problem solvers, not soft on commitment, but firm in purpose to make a better community.
John, that was a wonderful way to start us off. I might say breakfast will never be the same for me now. I'd like to bring Rotarian Blan up to introduce our guest.
Good afternoon. We have some guests with us today, and as I call who the Rotarian that brought the guest, there'll be a microphone brought to you, and then you can introduce your guest and tell us a few things about them. Our first Rotarian, Sharon Reed, and she has two guests.
So, oh goodness, last time I did this, it was off and I had to scream at you guys. But I have two guests. I have my husband, Jim, who's with me today. One of my neighbors, Bill Harris, who is from Kentucky originally and lived in San Francisco for many years and was head administrator for Kaiser Permanente at a hospital there, and is retired and returned to Lexington. So we're happy to have him here.
Thank you, Sharon. Then also John Morton has a guest.
Thank you. In a recent board meeting, we were talking about new members and asked to consider what are the needs of the organization. But looking around, I decided a cardiologist might be good for my guest today is Dr. John Sartini. John is a neighbor and a friend and a fairly recently retired cardiologist from Lexington Clinic.
And our Rotarian, Alicia Chapin, has three guests with her.
This is my Aunt Brenda from Huntington, West Virginia. She's retired from Cabell Huntington Hospital. This is my friend Vicki Farrell. She is a retired teacher. This is my friend Tammy Whitley. She is a retired pharmaceutical rep. And this is my bestie, Melinda Sullivan. She's also a retired teacher. So these are the women who taught your children here in Lexington.
And Bill Craycraft has a guest.
My guest today is Rhodes Smith. Rhodes works with me at City National Bank. He's been with the bank for 8.5 years. He's a longtime Central Kentuckian, and he's also interested in joining the program.
Are there any other, yes or Rotarians for any gifts? Yes.
Hey, this is my mama, Bobby Krill. She is visiting Rotarian from what district? 65. And she's visiting government.
Any other visiting Rotarians or just guests? Okay, thank you all for attending and hope you consider membership. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for the guests coming today and hope you will again join us sometime. This is a fun organization and we would love to have you to be a part of it. Now, at this time, I'd like to bring our President-elect, Brett Anderson, to the podium for a special announcement.
What a great way to start our new year off. Amazing speaker and an innovative way to raise revenues and funds for the Rotary Club. And when we were looking at the budget, we were like, we need to get innovative, and we decided we were going to come up with a lunch sponsor for $1,500 for the month. You can gain value brand. You can gain recognition at the podium. You can gain recognition coming into the meeting, and you get 6 guest passes and a whole lot more. It's still in its evolution, and we'd love for you to, if you're interested, let us know things that might be of value to you. And this month's first sponsor of lunch is Alicia Chapin. Alicia, will you come up here, please, and talk? We're going to allow Alicia to go ahead and pull the names of our of the raffle. And first number, last 4 digits, 7010. 7010. Looking for the ace of spades. What's the total up to now?
$1,570.
Oh, we have spade.
$1,570. $1,570.
$1,570. And the next number, 7023. Got the table over there. 2 winners at the same table. Go get that ace. Ace of spades. Just over 1,500. Thank you so much for sponsoring. Let's give it up for our first month sponsor, Alyssa Staples. Yes. Yes, sir. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, we have another guest with us. Good one. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
All right, goodness, how do you forget a judge? In any event, that was fun, and congratulations to the winner. Celebrating birthdays this week, we have Kiki, Michelle Ripley, Harry Richard, Dan Dorset, and today's big birthday is Sayer Combs. So let's give these Rotarians a nice clap. On the sad side, we've lost a couple of Rotarians. George Wilson passed away last week. He was a member of our club and had been a member of our club for 43 years. He served as past president of this organization as well as district governor. We will have a eulogy for him at a later time. In addition to that, we also lost longtime Rotarian Stan Harvey, who also passed away. He was a member of our club and had been for 26 years. So let's keep the Stan Harvey, the Harveys and the Wilson families in our thoughts and prayers. Now for the red badges, the blue badges. Sharon.
On behalf of Jerry Vandermeer, who couldn't be here today, I'm a member of the yearling committee. All of our red badge people are coming up, and I'm going to step over here. It's a ceremony where we trade red badges for blue badges, and people become official. So, guys, come on up here, please. No, that's all right. We'll do it. I hope everyone can hear me. All right. Rick Strode is not here today. We thought he would be here. So sorry he's not here. Marcus Cross. Marcus,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Cheyenne Fry, and her mom is going to come up and give her blue badge. Dylan Harper is not here today because he's on his honeymoon. Alicia? Yeah. You don't have yours out there. Okay, blue badge, welcome. John Wright, red badge. John has joined this yearling committee with Jerry Vandermeer and me, so we are delighted. John is wonderful. And John, you are Mr. Blue Badge. We'll trade it in. All right. So but there was a larger yearling class than just these. The names that I'm going to read are part of the yearling class, but they received blue badges since they had been Rotarians in another club. So there's a whole bunch of people. Chris Peck, Nelson Rhodes, Brian Sipe, Keith Knapp, Will Goldie, and Laura Mobley Corn. So we have a great yearling class that has now turned into blue badges. And we also have other red badges still around the room. So our yearling committee, which is John Wright, Jerry Vandermeer, and me, we do an orientation as a group of the yearlings, and they are required to do a community service project. And it's a great opportunity for those yearlings to get together, work together, service above self. So it's wonderful. So congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. All right, thank you.
Congratulations to those who have been trading in their red badges for blue badges. What that really means, and for those of you who are visitors, you came from being a cardinal to a wildcat. That's all. Susie, Basham have a special announcement about the RLI.
Congratulations to all the blue badges. So one of the things that we get to do in Rotary is to increase our leadership abilities and increase the knowledge that you have in Rotary International. And when I joined Rotary several years ago, one of the things that my mentor told me is you got to do RLI. You got to do RLI. I was like, what's an RLI? Well, it's Rotary Leadership Institute. And it's a great way to increase your knowledge in Rotary, but also increase your knowledge on just leadership principles for anything. I was able to graduate this past year from Rotary Leadership International, and we have another one coming up. But first, I want anybody who has been to RLI, even if it's just one of the sessions, can you please stand up? Awesome. And the team that pulls off RLI is, for our whole district, is mainly consists of people here in this room. And they are fantastic teachers, mentors, organizers, the whole thing. The next one coming up is January 27th. It is, registration starts at 9:45, goes to about 4:30. It's at the library over on the east side. Fantastic facility. You will learn so much. I really, really encourage you to sign up. You can see Judy Worth, or you can go to rlihoa.org and sign up, or just talk to any of us, Martha, anybody that's done it before, if you have any questions.
And it's free.
And it's free. That's right. It's free. Our district governor puts this money to be able to teach us. Where else are you going to get that kind of leadership and that kind of principles taught to you for free? No.
Thank you, Susan. This was a worthwhile endeavor. Dealing with you things come up, you got 30 seconds.
Good thing is I'm a fast talker. All right, so take out your calendar real quick, and I want you to mark on your calendar. January 19th, Friday morning, 8 a.m. We are doing our first Rotary networking event. This is open to Rotarians and non-Rotarians. It is free, and it is a great way for us to, as we've been talking about, expand knowledge of the Rotary Club to people outside of this room and to get more members, but also for us to make more connections for people in the community who may not already be in Rotary. It's going to be at 46 Solutions at Lexington Green. I talked fast, so if you have questions, email, call, text, or send smoke signals, and I will answer your questions so that we can get you there. See you then.
Thank you very, very much. And I am so delighted to know that we have a cardiologist that we might have, because we're going to have a pickleball thing coming up on the 21st of January. More details will be about this in your newsletter at this time, but it's going to be the 21st between 3 and 5 at the YMCA in the Hamburg. See Susan Adams if you'd like to sign up for that. Also, MLK January the 15th, if you're interested in marching downtown at 1 o'clock, be at the Central Bank Center, and you'll be a part of the march. Now for the critical piece about where our world is today, I'm going to introduce Dr. Laurel Martin, who will introduce our speakers today. Thank you.
As Rotarians, we have the opportunity to come together on a weekly basis and hear from very interesting people and people who are excelling in their field and experts in their subject matter to help us understand the issues that matter. While our president-elect has done a fabulous job of selecting our speakers for the year, there are a few key spots that are reserved for leaders in our community. Coach Calipari, Coach Stoops, Shannon Arvin from Keeneland, and we always reserve a spot for Dr. Farley from the Patterson School of Diplomacy to talk to us about those things. We are delighted to have him with us here today. His bio is in the program, and you can learn a lot about who he is and what he has done. But when he is not contributing to the national conversation on security, foreign policy, and military affairs, he is the father of 2 daughters, a set of twins. And a fun fact about him, he once lived up the street from Dave Matthews.
Is this the slide that guys are running? So I'm going to be quick. I will say that when I was formulating this presentation, and somebody asked the state of the world, and the first word that I wrote down was bad. And then the next words that I wrote down was could get worse. And some friends said, well, that could has a lot of hope embedded in it, right? And so that maybe too much of it, but we will see. This is our agenda. I'm going to go through it very, very briefly. What I want to start off with is Russia and Ukraine. Despite what's going on in the Middle East, this is still the largest conflict that we have in the world right now. The Ukrainians were not able to eject Russia from their territory. And now it looks like we are looking at a long-term war of attrition that could depend on a lot of different political processes. This slide right here was from my visit to Ukraine in September, and is made by the Georgian Legion, who are Georgians who are fighting on behalf of Ukraine. And as you can see, it's quite alarming. But this is a war that's going to continue. And during this winter, we are going to see aggressive bombings of Ukraine. by Russia using drones, using cruise missiles, using other. Ukraine will not surrender. The Ukrainians that I met had absolutely no interest in making peace with Russia. And so this is a conflict that unfortunately for the Russians and for the Ukrainians is going to endure for a while. But it's also something that the world has sort of priced into how they think about the future, right? That we now anticipate that this conflict may go on. But I think it also colors how we react to everything else, right? When October 7th happened, a lot of people immediately began thinking about how do we react to this in reference to what's going on between Ukraine and Russia. And in fact, both Ukraine and Russia lined up on either side of October 7th in order to try to score political points. But this is still a big conflict, and thousands of people are dying in Ukraine, and that's going to continue. But it's also contingent on some of the stuff I'll talk about at the end. The big thing in the news, and what everybody has been talking about for a while, is what happened on October 7th. October 7th is when Hamas launched an attack outside of the Gaza Strip that killed some 1,400 people, mostly civilians, and has led to retaliation on the part of Israel. That retaliation, nobody knows how many people have died, but it's in the tens of thousands. And we're probably never going to have exact numbers. This conflict is also going to continue. I'm not sure we'll exactly be fighting it in the same way a year from now, but it will continue to have repercussions. There is no indication that the Israelis are at all inclined to let up on Hamas, to let up on Gaza. And this may rewrite the geography, political geography at least, of the Middle East in the next few years. Now, this has led to another conflict, which probably is not getting as much attention, but probably should, because it involves the United States more directly than those other two. Houthi rebels operating out of Yemen and supplied largely by Iran, but also with their own equipment, have been attacking shipping in the Red Sea. Right? So this is shipping that is headed towards the Suez Canal, that is carrying much of the world's trade. And these ships, civilian ships, merchant ships, have come under attack from cruise missiles, they've come under attack from drones, and they've come under attack from small boats. The United States Navy is leading a coalition in support of attempting to limit these attacks. But this is an area where we may see direct U.S. intervention. The United States, since its inception, has been willing to wage war on behalf of freedom of the seas. And so this is a situation where we may see U.S. airstrikes, U.S. missile strikes against targets in Yemen, against Houthi targets in Yemen. Now, whether those conflicts will break out of the walls that they're in right now, break out of the cages we're trying to keep them in, is a different question. And I think one that's much harder to answer. There are also the simmering threats, and these are things we need to pay attention to because they might get bad very, very quickly. One of these is the Venezuela-Guyana border, which is not something that most people think of in terms of a crisis point. But the border has been unstable apparently since the 1890s, and Venezuela recently had a referendum where something like 90% of the voters indicated that yes, most of Guyana should belong to Venezuela. This was triggered by the discovery of large amounts of oil in Guyana, which made those parts of Guyana very attractive to Venezuela. Now, doesn't mean there's going to be a war. Venezuela has been trying to reintegrate itself into the global community over the past few years. And they've made gains that certainly they want to hold on to, but it's something that we need to pay attention to. And it's something that necessarily will involve the United States because it's in the Western Hemisphere. This is connected to, and I have APAC border, but it's also connected to the U.S. border, since many of the refugees, the asylum seekers headed to the U.S. border are from Venezuela. Okay, so what matters in Venezuela, what happens in Venezuela, matters for Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, because those repercussions are felt into the United States with respect to our border. These other ones here, the Russian periphery, Russia is not doing well. They are doing their best to try to pretend that they're doing well, but they're not doing well. And in the last several years, we've seen wars break out on Russia's periphery in spaces that Russia once controlled but can no longer exert control. So an example of this is Armenia and Azerbaijan. But we may see more conflict in Central Asia as different countries and different peoples settle scores with one another while Russia is distracted with Ukraine. Don't sleep on Korea, ever, because we never know exactly what's going to happen with the North Korean regime, with Kim Jong-un's regime, large part because he very much wants people to pay attention to it. I would not be surprised if we see a nuclear test in North Korea in the next year, perhaps trying to affect the US election. Speaking of elections, there's going to be a lot of them. This is a lot of elections and a lot of big elections over the next year. India is having a very large election. Indonesia is having an election. Pakistan is having an election. South Africa may vote out the ANC for the first time since the end of apartheid. Russia is having an election, but nobody really cares. Nobody pays attention to the one. We absolutely should pay attention to the election in Mexico, because AMLO's successor, that person's policy will have an immense impact on the United States. Mexico sneezes, the United States catches the cold, and vice versa. And so we pay attention to the elections that happen in Mexico. The United Kingdom will have an election, almost certainly be won by Labour. There may be significant movement on Northern Ireland if that happens. Some people are already talking about this is the year of Irish reunification, which I think is far too optimistic, depending on really optimistic about that. But it's certainly possible that we'll see some sort of maneuver on that. We'll also see elections in the European Union, and those elections in the European Union will tell us a lot about the direction that the organization is planning to take in the future, and will also tell us a lot about the EU relationship with Ukraine. The relationship with Ukraine is a big issue in Europe. Europe is mostly, but not uniformly, supportive of the Ukrainian war effort, especially with the US support. That matters a lot for whether Ukraine can continue to wage war. In terms of very general things that have been happening the last few years and are either continuing to happen or we can expect will happen, the global economy is tightening. This has manifested itself in the sense of tighter borders, tighter border controls, more export controls, generally more tariffs and trade regulations. We are also seeing, as I suggested earlier, security considerations influencing economic considerations. This is something we sort of thought we had been beyond in the 1990s and the 2000s. But what's happening in the Red Sea right now is affecting shipping rates. It's affecting the degree to which we can expect packages to get to where they're supposed to be. One upside is that energy prices are about as manageable right now as we have seen them. In large part, that's because of substantial U.S. production. Russia continues to try to produce as much as it can in order to fund its war, and OPEC has largely had to follow suit. And so the one bright spot anywhere is that energy prices are about as low relative to other prices right now as we've really seen in recent memory. That's about as far as we get in terms of rosy things. All of those elections that I talked about, right, and including the US election, we are talking about what are really in some ways anti-democratic forces that are more explicitly anti-democratic than they have been in decades. That there is a neo-authoritarian challenge to the way that we have conceived of the liberal democracy in the West. And that's playing out in places like Hungary, it is playing out in France, it's playing out in Italy, not so much in the United Kingdom right now, but certainly in the United States. So this election that we're having in November, which is November of this year, so we have 11 months to look forward to all of this. This election in November is going to structure U.S. foreign policy, and it's going to structure the entire world, right? It's going to affect how the entire world operates for at least the next 4 years, and probably for longer than that, right? We could see the United States no longer in NATO. We could see no U.S. support for the European Union. We could see a much different U.S. foreign policy after November than the one that we have become accustomed to over the past decades. And whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's certainly a substantial shift, right? It's certainly something we have to pay attention to. The liberal international order, the sort of background noise that we have come to understand as the way that the international system functions, the international society functions, there are a lot of questions about whether it can hold together. And there are a lot of people, a lot of countries that are no longer interested in holding up the liberal international order, right? This free trade, freedom of information, freedom of travel, guided by law, rule of law, law-abiding countries, may be something that is really drifting away from us, right? But again, we'll know more at the end of the year as to how we can think about the future of this order. As all this suggests, there are enormous challenges. The biggest thing, the single biggest thing that's going to happen this year is going to happen in November in the United States, right? Everybody's going to be paying attention. Everybody knows that it will be a momentous change if Donald Trump is reelected president. And that'll be very significant. It's the biggest thing happening in international politics this year. But there's still hope, right? There is always hope, whether electoral hope or hope by non-governmental organizations, by organizations such as this, for taking even the most difficult moments that face the United States and that face the entire world and turning them into something productive, right? Something good. And so engagement like this, appreciation of what's happening in the world, and really participation in global citizenship is, I think, the thing that holds us back from the brink. Or if we happen to go over the brink, it's what keeps us together as we endure the next several years. That was extremely brief, but I think we have about 10 minutes, so I'm happy to take any questions.
China and Taiwan and 34 trillion in national debt.
So I'll take those in order. So China, Taiwan, I'm not sure we're really going to see anything this year. There is an election in Taiwan. I think that what the Russia-Ukraine war indicated is that it's actually very hard to have a surprise attack. And any kind of war is incredibly expensive. And there's no indication besides some bluster from China that they're actually planning to launch it. Now, they may be better at surprise than the Russians, right? That would be something that would change a lot of our calculations. The national debt. So the number you said, what was it, 34? All right, so what I will say about that number is that that number doesn't mean anything, right? That's like saying I have this much credit debt, right? Maybe I have $10,000 in credit debt, right? That number only matters in relation to how much money I make in a year, right? If I make $1 million, that $10,000 is about, right? That I carry out on a credit card is not important. The bigger and more important number is the debt to GDP ratio, right? And that is how much debt does the country have relative to its overall GDP. Now, in the United States, our debt to GDP ratio is about as high now as it's been since the Second World War, right? And so that's, you know, to make it very roughly analogous, that's like having $30,000 in debt while making $30,000 a year, right? And that can be a problem. But the United States also has a lot of advantages. The dollar remains dominant. We can have as much cheap debt as we want, and that's part of the problem. But you know, coming out of the pandemic, the debt to GDP ratio was certainly a concern for the United States. And the management and health of the dollar as the world's reserve currency is part of that consideration.
You touched on Taiwan, but China in relation to BRICS and Belt and Road Initiative and how it colors some of those other topics that you addressed today. You know, where do you see China fitting in?
So most of the analysts agree that 2023 was not a great year for China. That the Chinese economy slowed down. A lot of the Belt and Road projects came into substantial problems. One thing that we've come to realize about the Belt and Road is that, yes, on the one hand, it is an instrument of Chinese foreign policy and Chinese influence, right? Essentially buying influence around the world. But the other thing that the Chinese are doing with Belt and Road is finding places outside of China to invest because investments inside of China are not paying off, right? So they are essentially exporting capital because keeping capital at home is unproductive. Now, a lot of countries have become very frustrated with China's behavior in Belt and Road. They've become very frustrated with Chinese lenders. I think what the Chinese are discovering is what the United States perhaps should have discovered a long time ago, that being a hegemon or an aspiring hegemon is not guaranteed to make you popular. And so even though the Chinese are still investing substantially abroad, it's not necessarily having the same economic or political impact that the Chinese would have. Now, China is still a big influential country. China is one of the reasons why Russia is capable of continuing to wage the war that it is waging, because technology has to find its way into Russia from China. The Russians don't produce anything really of technological sophistication, but they buy what they want from China. So in a lot of ways, China is underwriting the Russian war effort. People have also talked about China's influence in the Middle East, but it's hard to say at this point that China's really having a consequential impact. In the Middle East, people still look to the United States in order to solve problems. Not that we're great at that, but look towards the United States. But China, a very big player, very important, but it didn't have a great 2023.
Dr. Farley, what do you think the chances are that one of the ways Russia will reward North Korea for assisting in ordnance will be the provision of advanced nuclear technology?
So that's a really good question. I think, as most of you know, the North Koreans, much like the South Koreans, essentially both Russia and Ukraine are fighting a war with Korean munitions, right? Whether it's North Korean or South Korean. And the question was really, what are the North Koreans getting for their assistance for Russia? I think the biggest thing that the North Koreans are going to get is in terms of missile technology, and it's going to be in terms of making their missiles more reliable. We know that the North Koreans are pretty good at building missiles, but they're not necessarily at the level of reliability where you would like them to be if you want to have a reliable deterrent. So that's one big thing. I think we can expect that North Korean missiles will get better. But I think the more important part is that the Russians, I think, have fundamentally agreed to continue to float the North Korean economy. And I said continue, and that was actually a little bit of a misspeech because it's the Chinese who for years have been floating the North Korean economy. But now North Korea has substantial economic problems in the way of coping. And I think the Russians have stepped in and are offering to solve a lot of those problems. So I think the survival of the regime in North Korea, the security of the regime, is sort of the long run goal of the North Korean leadership in terms of supplying Russia with munitions. But they're going to have better missiles.
I recently heard a naval commander discuss how our military might and positioning has changed globally over the last 50 to 60 years. Can you comment on how you see the United States standing from a defense standpoint? How it's changed over our lifetime, what it is today?
So if we were to start to say the 1980s, right, which is 45 years ago, you would have seen really an overwhelming deployment of U.S. military power to Europe. That has ended, right, fundamentally been transformed. It's not as if the United States has left NATO, but the United States no longer stations the huge armored divisions and huge army establishments in Europe in the way that it once did. If we had had this conversation in 2005, you would have seen an enormous U.S. military deployment in the Middle East, right? And it was drawing in everything, Army, Navy, Air Force, into Iraq and Afghanistan. That also has largely changed. We've largely shifted away from that. I think that sort of the biggest transformation, if we look in terms of long-term, has been the shift of U.S. military power and attention to the Indo-Pacific, right? That really, for the first time since World War II, since the later stages of World War II, the United States is concentrating its military capabilities in what military officials call the Indo-Pac, the Indo-Pacific. And so that's sort of really the direction that we've gone, right? That we're focused more on the world's two biggest oceans now than we have been in a very long time.
John Meacham, the presidential historian at Vanderbilt, likes to say that if you think things are bad now, look at what's happened in our past. Right. Maybe expression, and we seem to come through those. Do you share his enthusiasm about our current situation?
So, and this might be the end, since this is going to be a 90-second answer. There's a very funny historian named Rick Perlstein, and he's a historian of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I recommend his books. Nixon Land, Reagan Land, The Invisible Bridge. He writes a lot about what the 1970s actually looked like in the United States. And when you read about the 1970s, and then you think about where we are today, it's like, well, you know what, actually things aren't that bad, right? I mean, remember in the 1970s, there was terrorist violence in the United States continually, right? Left-wing terrorists, right-wing terrorists, explosions, assassination attempts. We imagine the country to be polarized and sort of unremittingly, hopelessly polarized. There were economic troubles, economic malaise. We seemed much more divided then, maybe Vietnam, than even we do right now. And so reading about how things were the year I was born and then thinking about now, I am inclined a little bit to say, let's pump the brakes and with the doom, right? With the doom and gloom. It may not all be doom and gloom. It may be okay. That's the best I can answer on that, right? That it might not be as bad as it sounds. One more.
Yeah, looking back on your previous couple answers, what's the situation with the ability of the military to recruit quality recruits, both physically and with what talent they need? What impact is that currently having, and how long tail will that impact have on some of these questions?
So that's a great question. It's a really long answer to sort of answer that in any kind of useful way. I mean, the military is definitely having a recruiting crisis. There is no question about that. But you need to put it in context, right? The context you need to put it in is that the United States military preemptively disqualifies about 75% of young people, right? So tells 75% of young people, you can't be in the military because you're out of shape, you don't have the right education, you've used drugs, you have a felony, right, on your sheet, right? And so when you are disqualifying most of the American population before you even start, you're going to have recruiting troubles. It's more complicated than that, and there are more figures, but I think that's a really important point of context.
I'd like to thank Dr. Farley for this dose of optimism. I'd like to thank him for this dose of pessimism. But above all, we'd like to thank him for his dose of reality. For with that, we're going to give you a lithograph from our Rotarian, Bill Strauss. I appreciate your being here. Thank you so much. Gentlemen,